So this is episode 1 of a siege tactics video for Total War Warhammer 2, but some of these principles would still apply to really any siege-based game in the Total War franchise, I believe, even though I don't think there are any that I know of, at least, simply because this is the only Total War game I've ever played. Now, we're beginning with placement of the units. So, well, let's talk about, I guess, the composition before placement. So this army is supposed to represent like an early game, like cheap, low tier army that would be accessible to like an early campaign, possibly even as like a second army as soon as you can begin to afford one. It consists of 8 spearmen, I think 5 archers, 2 great eagles, a lord, and a caster, major life. Neither of them are mounted, because like I said, it's supposed to represent like an early game or like a fresh army, so they might not have mounts. And it also shows that the effectiveness of foot heroes and lords in this strategy in general, because of their lower hitboxes, or their smaller hitboxes compared to larger entities, which is what they become once they get a mount. Also, a few siege pieces. Now, I wasn't sure how many Eagle Claw bolt throwers at first I should bring, because you want to bring as few as possible if like you want to have like just a standard like military engagement in the Total War game, using here like a fairly balanced 8 men and 5 archer sort of core with 2 flying units in the Great Eagles. Now, with this map, it's something what I would refer to as an 80 or 180 degrees siege attack, as opposed to a 90 degree siege attack. The 90 degree siege attack has a wall that would extend about to here and then extend this way. There'll be a separate video on how to do that, but the fundamentals are basically the same, but there are a few things that you can do on maps like that one that you can't do on this one, such as deploying your units in the very far corner of the map and always effectively be outside the range of these turrets, or at least most of them, which might make a difference depending on what type of turret you're up against, because none of these turrets are universal across factions, or technically across races and tower levels. So certain buildings change what kind of fort tower it is and what kind of ammunition they shoot. Some of them are more effective against small entity lords and heroes. So the first thing is to protect your main core, because they're still effectively what's going to win you the fight, at least in an army like this one. Now, if there was like a bunch of dragons in the army, or possibly like more healers, or if the princess was on her dragon, for example, you might be able to get away with having very few foot units for winning a siege engagement, even though it still wouldn't be ideal for just winning the overall game. So that's why a standard like military core is still like very valuable, even if you could win this battle easier with other units, because it's still supposed to be effective on the overworld. So again, we want 4 bolt throwers. First thing first, take out the turrets that are going to be a threat. Now, in order to minimize how threatening the towers are, unit positioning is very important. We put all of our units to one side of the map. we don't spread them out across the whole wall face, because then there would be many different turrets that could potentially target our units. And not enough ammunition with the bolt throwers to be both effective at destroying the turrets, weakening the men on the walls, and possibly even killing the dragon. So one of the other things you could take advantage of, some maps have woods or forests that you can hide some of your infantry units in. Here you see there's just like a big blob of spearmen hiding. So even if there was some kind of mistake that was made, and suddenly like this turret was online, and this mage was out of position, say it was like just right outside the line of this turret, but yet this turret still can make contact with these units or these bolt throwers. At least the units will be safe, though the bolt throwers, no siege equipment, at least in Total War. Warhammer 2 can actually hide in the woods. They don't have the the hide in forest ability, even when you dismount them. So even if you take them off the siege piece and then walk them into the woods, they still can't effectively hide. So, preamble through. Let's watch and see what happens, and I'll make comments throughout. So the first thing is target the towers. So we'll see that they effectively are able to hit the towers. A little bit of lag there. And what I do with some of these lords and hero units is have them run back and forth in a line just to minimize the damage from the turrets. So like just they take less hits overall, preserves their HP in the long run. You'll see that after I destroy these two turrets, I attempt to move these units over here to position themselves to fire at the princess, but we get thwarted by a transition of units from this space over here onto these towers, which then threatens our siege pieces, and also archers line the wall and prevent our siege equipment from getting any closer to be able to shoot the dragon. Now eventually I do find a pocket where they can shoot the dragon in the very, very end of the game, right here, but even in this early engagement, these archers would be able to take shots at them. So in the meantime, while these guys are getting in position, I begin to position my archers. Now my archers outrange their archers, which is pretty important in a lot of siege battles if you have to rely on archers. Not all of these tutorials will be relying on archers. Some factions are able to do these battles without any kind of arm or hand ranged weapons. Now obviously we kind of put ourselves in range of their spellcaster, so we end up losing quite a few units right here, but nothing too substantial. And here we begin to notice that we're never going to be able to effectively get in range of this dragon from this angle without taking severe casualties on the bolt thrower crews and effectively losing the bolt throwers, or even our mages, or our mage and lord. So we pull them out of this engagement and bring them back to their original positioning, which should happen very soon. I think there was a small delay because I was confused as to why I lost so many archers here. I thought maybe I extended them too far, or that the handmaiden here was taking shots at them and somehow killed that many in such a short amount of time, but then I figured, oh, it must have been the life mage and her wizardry. So we get our bolt throwers secured, bring our lord and heroes back. And now again, like, the purpose of a strategy like this one is to minimize losses, so that like in a campaign you can secure a fort with its walls intact without having to siege it and destroy all the walls, and be able to defend it. So there's two things that this strategy allows you to do effectively on the campaign map. You're able to attack almost immediately without risking reinforcements from the enemy flanking you and then overwhelming you with numbers, and also like turn times, right? Like the amount of turns you spend in like an area securing a fort is reduced from possibly like 10 turns or more to 1 turn by taking on an engagement like this, while also minimizing losses so that when you do secure it, you're still able to have a strong fighting force against the enemy if they try to take it back. And also if the enemy or and the army the army power that you would have would be comparable to if like you waited like the 10 turns to build like siege equipment and like destroy the walls, etc. So here I attempt to target the Handmaiden, but the Handmaiden's in a pretty powerful position behind this little gate arc with like the eagle piece here, or I guess it's not an eagle, but the wings of an eagle, or a phoenix technically. They're elves. At this point we're just allowing our archers to free fire onto the walls and afflict as much damage as possible. Now in campaign, if you were to use archers in a situation like this, you would make sure that you invest in abilities or skills that allow your archers to hold more ammunition and effectively do more damage with it too. And that would also carry over for the bolt throwers. So we'll speed this up because they're just going to expend their ammo. After a while I stopped shooting at the bowmen because I realize I'm just wasting ammo and it's not hitting them. And then I think I focus on the mage of life, or maybe the archers begin to finish the mage off. Here I begin to move these guys over here, hoping that I can get a better angle on the Handmaiden, but yeah, it's kind of futile. I just can't get any good shots on this Handmaiden because of this little obstruction. So time goes by. All of our ammo is expended. So instead of just rushing the walls now because we're out of ammo, and instead of wasting our bolt thrower ammo, or at least all of it, because we still have a dragon back here that we have to deal with, we are going to use the Great Eagles to do cycle charging on the units on the wall. Mostly the White Lions if we can, and finishing off some of these weaker Lothian Sea Guard units, and also prioritizing their leadership by taking out the Handmaiden. So that's likely what's going to happen very soon. Now, any damage that these eagles suffer until like their healing cap can be healed up by our Mage of Life. In campaign, you'll likely have more Winds of Magic to be able to use, so the Life Mage would also be able to cast spells onto the wall to inflict damage and speed up this process, racking up probably hundreds of kills themselves using the root spell and the yeah, I don't know, I forgot the 2 spell names and I can't check them, I'm sorry. Or maybe I can. Oh yeah, I can. Let's see. Okay, maybe it won't let me. It's not letting me read it, so sorry about that. Forgetting the spell names is sad. Very sad. But the two spells that you can see on this unit card, the one that is the last to the right, and the first one after the passive ability, can both be used on the wall and inflict, well, tremendous damage on like a group like this right here. So here we're healing up our eagles and then we're sending them in. So the next like probably 20 minutes or so of this gameplay is just allowing the eagles to do as much damage as possible. So we're just going to fast forward through this. I might speed this up in post also, just to make it go by a little faster. Maybe add a couple cinematic shots. Little fail there, but at least we'll be able to see one of them kind of like dive bomb on top of these white lions. And not as climactic as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, we'll just fast forward through this, and it's supposed to be a strategic video, not a aesthetic one anyways, so. So here we allow 2 of our Reaper bolt throwers to expend their ammo onto the units on the wall, just to kind of speed things up a little bit. I realized that they're actually not that effective at shooting units off of the wall. So they definitely don't have one of the best eagle, like the Eagle Claw bolt throwers are probably like one of the worst siege pieces for doing something like actually winning a siege battle. They're really good at like counter siege warfare or like siege equipment warfare. So like doing damage to like other cannons or trebuchets, or even like hitting like large monsters. They're good for that, but and like breaking towers, they're pretty decent at that. But that's about it. They're not that great at like killing units off of the walls. I think like between these 2 bolt throwers there was about 50 kills. So not too many. So I move up my infantry line. Now, I'm not going to scale the walls. I don't want them to suffer. Again, this is about minimizing casualties as much as possible. And we don't want them to suffer from attrition, or not attrition, but vigor, by getting tired climbing up the ladders up on this face of the wall. And then, so having their combat stats reduced really low and losing a lot of units to just equals fighters and their spearmen, and much better fighters and the swords masters and white lions. And I'm also saving my winds of magic to keep these guys at their healing cap, and then I expend the rest of it into one spell that I eventually find pretty good value in, that hits these white lions pretty hard. But for the meantime, I'm just going to continually use the eagles to basically clean up these units. Now I let them kind of sit here in these spears for a little too long, which is definitely where you don't want them to be. The spearmen can take on the spearmen. You really want the eagles taking on the white lions and possibly the swords masters at some point. But definitely at least the white lions. You don't want them sitting here in the spearmen. That was a little bit of a mistake on my part. Now at some point, I think I try to bait... I was just waiting for Winds of Magics to pile up right there, and I'm trying to bait these units into like grouping up. And I think eventually I bring my Lord in position. Here, I'm clearing out these guys. Get the Lord in position, and I allow her to start shooting her bow into the swords masters, since that would be a pretty good value. Now right here, all their elite units begin to kind of pile up. And I think I drop my cast here? No, it's not here. It's after my lord steps up. Once my lord steps up, and then multiple of their high tier units kind of cluster around it, and then I drop the bomb. So about like right here, you can see there's like a nice tight blob with multiple of like their high tier units, the Swords Master, the White Lions, all kind of piled up. So I drop our strongest spell right on top of them, doing pretty decent damage to the White Lions, though the Swords Masters managed to get away. And then I get the Eagles on them almost immediately to see if I can like get a terror route on them. Again, I gotta be cautious of the Spearmen since they are anti-large and these are large entities. I think I let one of them almost routes, and it actually does route later in the game. So here I start to bring in my infantry, and I get my lord into combat with their strongest infantrymen and the Swords Masters. So here we're just going to kind of overwhelm them with number and try to get flanks around them. So I try to bring this unit around this way, and I eventually manage to get one of these groups of spearmen around this flank. And I'm also expending some ammo onto these guys on the wall, though I save enough for the dragon later. I mean, not enough to kill it, but enough to like begin to damage it. And even by then we have so many spearmen, as soon as it lands, it really wouldn't be able to win the engagement, but it would definitely be able to kill quite a few of our spearmen. So yeah, now the name of the game here is just to basically scare them off the battlefield. Get surrounds, cycle charge with the Eagles every now and then, and kind of like, you know, play it like that. And we don't want to overextend because right now the dragon isn't aggroed. The AI in this game tends to put a lot of their very high valuable flying units right over like this like capture point as like a defense deterrent or like as a way of defending it. And it usually bites them in the ass more than it helps, because they tend not to try to engage with any of the units until you actually like get within like a zone like right here, or if you have like another flying unit around this zone. So trying not to aggro the dragon too early is, or like, you know, the dragon or other, you know, terrorgeists or manticores, whatever it might be, they almost always behave very similarly, just kind of sitting back over the capture point. And here I bring up the bolt thrower and I begin hitting it, and I realize how much more ammo I would need with the bolt thrower to really do a substantial amount of damage to it. This was about 8 volleys worth of damage. And then I get my bow over here and I start getting shots, and I get all my spearmen in position, and the dragon runs away. Now, as you'll see in the post-battle screen, we get very few losses relative to theirs. Like, obviously, we managed to defeat over 1,000 units while only losing about 127 of our units. So it's a very efficient way of moving across the map in the Total War Warhammer world, and keeping like momentum in the overworld, so that you don't have to spend many turns re-recruiting units that you lose during siege battles, and healing them also. Now, the Great Eagles, like in the next fight, you can get them healed up with the Life Mage. They'll still hit their healing cap most likely, but at the very least, by the next fight, their healing cap refreshes and they'll almost be at full health by then. Or they probably will be at full health. So, like in just like a normal fight where they likely don't have to do so much carrying like they would on like a battle like this, they can still fulfill their role very effectively. And, yeah, this is kind of like the beginning of the series, but also it's also the probably the worst part of the series too, because I think the High Elves probably have like the weakest ability to like succeed in these kinds of like engagements, simply because of the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower not being very effective as like a weapon against siege warfare effectively. The next video is going to be the other extreme, and I'm going to show the Vampire Coast with the Queen's Bess and show how you can easily kill 3 times, 4 times, 5 times as many units, possibly 10 times as many units as you have, and walk away with no casualties. And you're literally getting like kills in like the 2,000 range, 3,000 range, using a very similar strategy with Terrorgeist, Queen Bess, and Necrofexes. So that's going to be what the next video is going to be, and I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any critiques, leave them in the comments. If you have any more ideas with regard to how this series should progress, leave those in the comments too. I also have plans to do an SFO version for these kinds of battles, where you're likely to be able to get very, very few casualties, especially even with any faction that has access to flying casters or flying like dragon lords and healing. So pretty much, most factions, and you can probably like win an entire siege battle with just like a single unit that can like cast and heal, because the healing caps in SFO like tend to be in the tens of thousands, where in the regular game it's like in a couple thousand. So what like a single unit can do in SFO is like much greater. Like these Great Eagles, they would be at full HP still right now. I would just like kept healing them. I mean, I probably would have ran out of Winds of Magic, but the strategy would just then to bring more casters and to have a larger Winds of Magic pool. All right, things that are possibly going to be shown in the future. Look forward to them. I'm out, YouTube.